Thank you for having me for such a nice webinar. I will try my best to share the experience that I have so far in the COVID-19 and mucormycosis. Let me share my screen first. The presentation is visible to everyone?
Yes, it's all good. Good to go.
Okay. So, thanks for having me in this webinar. The topic is given to me is all you need to know about mucormycosis, right? So, lots of things already we heard about the mucormycosis, and some misconceptions are also there. So, let's try to learn those things and rectify those misconceptions and learn something new that can help us to prevent the mucormycosis in the future days. So that would be the outline of my presentation. First, I would try to introduce the topic, why we are talking about the mucormycosis as of now. What was the problem statement globally and nationally before COVID era and after the COVID-19 pandemic. The brief about the causative agent, the fungus itself, what are the risk factors or predisposing factors, and what is the presentation of mucormycosis, for example, symptoms and signs and all that. Classification of mucormycosis, the diagnosis, what are the different modalities, including biopsy and imaging methods and all that. Management, surgical or medical management, and what are the constraints that also we are facing while giving the treatment as a mucormycosis. What we can do for the prevention of mucormycosis, that we will talk in detail. Under the Epidemic Act, it is notifiable disease. So what is that? We will also discuss. And the last but not the least, these are the real data. That is the state data, the Gujarat state data. We will see that how the discrepancy is there in the theoretical part and the real world data. We'll see and we'll try to understand why there is a discrepancy or there is some contradictory evidence which we have generated in the COVID-19 pandemic and in the time of mucormycosis. And after learning all these things, what are the area of research for which we need to work on that for having the better diagnostic modalities or better management options or other things which we can help for the management of mucormycosis. So let's start with the first introduction. So mucormycosis is a very rare but not the new disease for all of us. So it's not like COVID-19 that appears for the first time. It was there, it is there, and it will be there. Mucormycosis is nothing but it's a opportunistic infection. It occurs only among those who are having the low immunity because of uncontrolled diabetes, or maybe after the organ transplantation, maybe after the stem cell transplantation, or some solid organ transplantation like kidney or other organ transplantation, or maybe some chemotherapy. These are the situations which are decreasing our immunity, and that's why the mucor may be grown up. Generally, it is exposed. It is caused by exposure of mucor, that is also commonly called as a mold, which is commonly found in the environment, either in the soil or in the plant, or some decaying organic material like rotten fruits and vegetables, or some animal manures. These are the natural habitants of the mucor or fungus. And generally, these fungus are ubiquitous, means not harmful in the normal scenario when we are immunocompetent, right? They are normally found in the environment, and we inhale those spores in our daily routine life. But because of our good immunity, those spores are not germinating into the hyphae and not in the active form, let us say. That's why we are not getting the mucormycosis in a daily life, right? But sudden surge, or rather say epidemic of mucormycosis, has been reported in the recent time as a serious complications of COVID-19, we say. So that happens during COVID-19 infection itself, or after the recovery of COVID-19 as a sequel, after even few weeks after the recovery of COVID-19. So what are the situations making prone us for having mucormycosis, and how we can prevent that from occurring? That we will try to learn in the upcoming slides. first let's understand what was the scenario before the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you see this map, it says that India is having incidence of mucormycosis around like 0.2 to 0.49, roughly less than 1 case per million population, right? But right now, as on 25th May 2021, 11,770 patients of mucormycosis have been reported and they are on the treatment. So, right? So if we translate those numbers into case per million, it comes roughly 9 to 10. It means it has gone by at least 20 times. 20 times more than the pre-COVID era. It's only the reported cases. So it could be more than 20 times. It may be more than 30 or 40 times than our routine mucormycosis incidence. So it is around 10 cases per million. That is definitely much higher than what we see in the routine practice, right? So we can say it's an epidemic of mucormycosis during pandemic of COVID-19. That's a literal meaning of this slide. If you see interstate comparison of COVID-19 and mucormycosis, if we see the actual numbers, Gujarat stands first, right? Gujarat is having the highest number of mucormycosis cases. It is around 2,859 cases. So it's almost 24.4, almost 25% of total mucormycosis cases of country, they are reported from Gujarat. And the second highest cases are reported from Maharashtra. That is 2,770, and that is almost 23.6% of total cases of mucormycosis. That is second highest. So if cumulatively, almost 50% of total mucormycosis cases are reported from only 2 states, Gujarat and Maharashtra. So that's the catch here. Out of all the states, almost all states are universally affected from the COVID-19, but the mucormycosis cases are reported clearly more in excess from these 2 states only, Gujarat and Maharashtra. So that is the area of research. What is the underlying conditions making prone these states for having more mucormycosis cases? Maybe the prevalence of diabetes, or maybe the treatment protocol, or the pre-existing other issues, or the number, the reported, the data transparency. Lots of things are coming in picture. That's why we need to work on that. Second important concept that is shown here in the last column, that is COVID cases or mucormycosis. What we are trying to understand here is what number of cases are there of COVID cases for mucormycosis. That is also very problematic for Gujarat. For every 277 COVID cases, there is one mucormycosis case being reported. If you see Tamil Nadu, only one mucormycosis case is reported for 8,000, around 8,000 COVID cases. So this needs to be understood, and we will see in the later part of the presentation why this kind of scenario could be there and why we need to understand these things in a detail. But as of now, definitely the Gujarat and Maharashtra are leading the chart of mucormycosis cases, and that's why they are being more allocated with the more vial of amphotericin B. Now let's understand what are the causative agents which are implicated for having the mucormycosis. Definitely it's a fungal infection. So the species of Mucorales order and the most commonly implicated species are 3: Rhizopus, Mucor, and Epsidia, and that is also called as Rickettsia. Actually, there are 9 species in the Mucorales order of this group, but the 3 which are commonly found in the cases of mucormycosis, these are the Rhizopus, Mucor, and Epsidia. So the most common causative agent is Rhizopus. Most common causative agent that is involved in the mucormycosis, it's not Mucor, but actually it's a Rhizopus. So for undergraduate and for exam going students, it should be highlighted here is Rhizopus is the most common causative agent for a mucormycosis. Definitely Mucor is there, but the most common is Rhizopus. Mucormycosis, literal meaning of mucormycosis is mycosis caused by mucor. The striking feature and the most problematic feature for us is angio invasion of tissues and blood vessels, and sometimes nerves also. that interrupts the blood supply and leads to ischemic changes and ultimately the necrosis. So that's necrosis leads to discoloration to black. So tissue turns black. So angio invasion is the issue for us in terms of mucormycosis. So angio invasion leads to interruption in the blood supply. Blood supply interruption will lead to ischemic changes. For long time ischemic, then will turn into necrosis. Necrosis will turn the color to the black. So that's why the formal name that is given to mucormycosis, it's a black fungus. So it's not the morphological feature of fungus or fungi that is the black, but the presentation is the necrosis. That's why it's a black fungus. So that's why it's also known as a black fungus, or sometimes it's also known as a zygomycosis. So there are three names of the mucormycosis: mucormycosis itself, black fungus, and zygomycosis. And one more thing which I would like to highlight here is, we all know that fungal growth will be more when there is a dead tissue or decaying matter. So whenever there is angio invasion, that would be the dead tissue. Those dead tissue will further facilitate growth of fungal, and that's why we need to rid those from dead tissue as early as possible to stop further growth of the fungi, right? Second thing about the epidemiological point of view is how we are get those spores in our body. There are three ways or portal of entry through which we are getting the spores. Spores is the positive form of mucor, right? So through inhalation, sometimes through the ingestion, or rarely through the direct contact. So basically there are three way of getting the infection: inhalation, ingestion, and direct contact. So when we are getting through inhalation, that is the most common way of getting the spores, and most common presentation also in the form of nasal cavity or involvement of sinuses, or maybe sometimes eyes and further brain. So that is the common way of getting the infection, common way of the presentation. So whenever the inhalation is the route of entry, you are getting symptoms and signs related to nasal cavity involvement or sinus involvement or eyes or maybe brain. If it is involvement, if the portal of entry is the ingestion, then the symptoms will be related to the GI symptoms, maybe the problem with the abdominal pain or something, necrosis of some intestinal tissue sometimes, or it is direct contact through like trauma or some injuries or sometimes burns, and indirect spores are getting entry into the skin, then we are getting some cutaneous presentation. So that is the portal of entry will decide what kind of organ will be involved, right? One more thing that I would like to highlight here is not contagious in nature, right? As the surge of mucormycosis has been observed during pandemic of COVID-19, people think that it is also one kind of things like COVID-19. COVID-19 also too much contagious. People are getting exposed from infected person and they are getting COVID-19. So they also feel that the mucormycosis also could be a contagious. But we have to make very clear in their minds that mucormycosis is not a contagious in nature. Only those who are immunocompromised and they have inhaled those spores, they are going to only get the activated form of mucormycosis. Otherwise, immunocompetent people will not have any kind of mucormycosis. And as far as CFR, case fatality ratio is concerned, as already Venkatesh told us in the introduction part, it is ranging from 46 to 96%. Right? It depends on three things: underlying patient condition, what was the pre-existing conditions, what was the pre-existing immunity, pre-existing health status, other organ involvement, all these things about patient conditions. So one is underlying patient condition, second is type of fungus, and third is body site. So these three things will decide what would be the CFR of that ongoing mucormycosis. So on an average, it is 54%. So cumulative is 54% has been witnessed in published data. But what would be the case fatality ratio in the ongoing mucormycosis epidemic? That need to be calculated, because most of the patients are under treatment. So outcome is not yet decided. So recent CFR is not calculated yet. But whatever we are giving data here, it is already published data. Okay. So whenever only the nasal cavity or sinus are involved, the least CFR 46%. Though it's too high for as compared to other disease, But out of these three, the least in the sinus infection. If lungs are involved, then it goes up to 76%, and it's whenever it's disseminated, more than one organ are involved, it goes up to 96%. So almost 100%. So whenever there is disseminated type of mucormycosis, the CFR goes up to 100%. So why it is so deadly disease? Because it goes one organ to other part of the body so fast. It's rapidly progressive fungal disorder. So if any delay in identification or in diagnosis or in the management will lead to high morbidity and high mortality. High morbidity in the sense some organ will be removed, some debridement, extended debridement, sometimes extension of the eyes, so removal of eyeball, or sometimes some brain tissue also to be removed. So high morbidity and high mortality, which already discussed, up to 96% it may go up. So that's why it's very deadly disease we have to identify as early as possible. So in through this webinar, we are going to sensitize you to know what are the presenting complaints and signs which we need to learn, and we need to work on that to diagnose as early as possible. We all know that it gets entry through the nasal route. After getting into the nasal cavity, it enters to the middle turbinate, and through that it reaches to maxillary sinus. So from nose to nasal turbinate, then it goes to maxillary sinuses. From that, it erodes through the necrosis, the floor of the orbit, and it will reach to eye. And actions were not taken or delay in the diagnosis or management, it may go further to the brain. Right? CNS can involve in the later part. So that is the as early as possible, if we work, we can prevent at this level, or at the maxillary sinus, or at eye, or maybe it reaches to CNS. So it depends on our way of management. How prompt we work, we can stop further progression or further extension of the disease. Sometimes spreading, instead of spreading to the upward side, it may go sometimes down to the respiratory tract and may go to the lungs and may present as a pulmonary mucormycosis. But it's a very rare. It happens only in the patient with the hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, or in some specific situation, it represents as a mucormycosis of the lungs. We will see in detail in the later presentation. Now we will try to understand why we are getting so much huge surge of mucormycosis in the recent time in the COVID-19 era. What are the factors playing role for surging the cases of mucormycosis? So first, COVID-19 infection itself, a big reason for having the surge of mucormycosis. COVID-19 has tendency to worsen the diabetic, that existing diabetic status, and sometimes it also lead to hyperglycemic status, or may lead to new diagnosis of diabetic people. So existing diabetic also will be disturbed, and some people will have for the first time hyperglycemic status because of only COVID-19 as an infection. Second thing is, during the COVID-19, because of this uncontrolled diabetic status or COVID-19 induced hyperglycemia, sometimes those high sugar level will impair phagocytic activity of macrophages, and that is due to impaired glutathione pathway. We all know that if there is a high sugar level, the glutathione pathway will not work properly, and that also affect indirectly the macrophage phagocytic activity. So what we are trying to say here is, ultimately immunity will be diminished or impaired. Third thing is, during the treatment of COVID-19, we use steroids or other immunomodulator drug like tocilizumab or itolizumab sometimes. So those drugs also decrease our immunity level, right? So steroid would work as a fuel in the time of fire. Now fire means what? Already immunity is worsened as COVID-19 infects itself. Second thing is, due to hyperglycemia or uncontrolled diabetic status, there is already immunity is hampered, and added on that, steroids are also coming in picture. That's why they work as a fuel to the fire and making the immunity status very much compromised, and that's why we are having the more problems in the COVID-19 time, right? So let's understand with one graphical presentation, that is unholy trinity of mucormycosis. That includes COVID-19, uncontrolled diabetic status, and steroid. So first, COVID-19 infection itself, one of the factor for having mucormycosis because it decreases the immunity. It definitely uncontrolled diabetes leads to high sugar level, which further decreases immunity. And we know that sugar, whenever there is sugar high, fungal loves sugar, so fungal growth will be easier. And steroid also decreases the immunity, and that's why all these three things comes together, make people or patient prone to get the mucormycosis. So whenever there is COVID-19 infections, high blood sugar level, and immunosuppressive status, all when these three things are together, the risk of mucormycosis goes very, very high. So that's why it's called as unholy trinity of mucormycosis. Now let's understand. We have already discussed that diabetic status is one of the part of trinity that leads to mucormycosis. Now let's understand what is the status of diabetes in the different states. If you see in this chart, Tamil Nadu is having the 10.4 percentage of prevalence of diabetes, right? 10% or 10.4%. If you see Gujarat, it's 7.1%. If you see Maharashtra, it's 8.4. So now the question comes here is, despite of having high prevalence of diabetes, Tamil Nadu is not reporting much cases of mucormycosis as compared to Maharashtra and Gujarat. So that is the area of research. Right? So and I must mention here is, it's a data based on ICMR sponsored study that is published in Lancet. It is, I think, a little bit old data, but it is published in 2017. So these numbers might be vary with the current status, but the message may be the same. Some states having, despite of having high prevalence of diabetes, they are not having the high number of mucormycosis, but at the same time they are having high number of COVID-19 cases, but they are not reporting the high number of mucormycosis. That's the message we are trying to convey here. Second, this picture is very important. That is diabetic care cascade. What we are trying to explain here is, like we talk in the hypertension management, rule of half. Almost same thing which also is there in the diabetic management. For example, there are 100 persons with the diabetic are there in the under treatment, or sorry, not under the treatment, they are under the observation or under the diagnosis. Out of those, 53 will be knowing their diabetic status, and 47 will not be having the idea about their diabetic status. Out of those 53, 42 will be treated, and 58 will be untreated. And out of those 53, 43, only 42 are getting treated. So 11 will be coming in this pool. So these 47 who are not aware about their diabetic status, and out of these 53, 11 will come also in this pool. So 47 plus 11, 58 will not be treated for diabetic status. Out of those 42 who are on the treatment of diabetic, only 25 will having the controlled diabetes. Okay. So again, we are missing here from 17 person who are getting treatment but not getting the controlled sugar level. So 58 who are not in the treatment, and 17 who are in the treatment but not controlled. That's why 58 plus 70, so 75. So what I am trying to say here is, out of 100, only 25 are on the treatment and having the controlled sugar level. 75 out of 100 are those who are either unaware or untreated or uncontrolled. So 1 in 2 Indian diabetics are unaware, that is clearly visible here, and 3 in 4 diabetics are uncontrolled diabetic, right? So this is the area of concern. We need to work on this. Only 25% of diabetic patients are having the controlled sugar level. So we need to work on this, how we can manage this, and we are working on this. Now, what are the predisposing factors? 3 of them we have discussed. First, diabetic we have discussed, steroid we have discussed, and comorbidity or malignancy we have discussed. Now, the things that are left is prolonged ICU stay. Now, how it can affect our immunity or mucormycosis? Prolonged ICU stay, one theory is oxygen therapy. oxygen therapy because of two things. First is industrial oxygen supply. These are all theories, not proven things, right? Industrial oxygen, and second is humidifier. Means water, what we use as a water, that may be not pure water, or maybe carrying this pore, and that those pores getting entry into through the oxygen supply system, and that's why people are getting the mucormycosis. Or industrial oxygen are not much pure like medical oxygen. That's also one of the theory why we are getting the more mucormycosis during the COVID-19 treatment. But this also things are challenged, and we will see in the later real data. These things are also not fitting in the existing real data. That's why also area of concern, area of research. Then these things, voriconazole therapy, it's actually antifungal drug. Because of, despite of being an antifungal drug, it's taken as a predisposing factor for mucormycosis. So why it is so, we will see in the next slide. But despite of this, there are three main other predisposing factors like HIV/AIDS. We all know that it's definitely immunosuppression. Then broad spectrum antibiotics. We all know that when we are using antibiotics for a longer period of time, or in higher dose, or not under the guidance of any physician or any expert, those higher spectrum antibiotics will lead to disturb the equilibrium of bad bacteria and good bacteria. So that this equilibrium will lead to the fungal growth. Then the last is iron chelators like desferrixamine, which we use in some treatment in some other disease. Those desferrixamine will lead to increase the free iron in the blood, and that will taken by siderophore, and siderophore will facilitate the fungal growth. So whenever there is free iron, or some theory also says that some zinc supplementation also have been linked with the higher number of mucormycosis cases, but these things are also need to be evaluated. These are all just hypotheses. But one question must be come in our mind, that immunocompetent who are not having at risk of these enlisted things, might they get mucormycosis? Then answer is yes. Immunocompetent host also can develop the mucormycosis. But the point is, they are going to get only the cutaneous mucormycosis in general, because only the traumatic injury or sometimes burn or insect bite, those will work as a portal of entry for the spores, and that's why they have some limited cutaneous form of mucormycosis. But the generalized or disseminated or pulmonary or rhinocerebral mucormycosis are very, very rare among the normal individuals or immunocompetent hosts. Like we have the severe form of mucormycosis in the immunocompromised people, right? Voriconazole, which we already started to talk about, that voriconazole, it's actually antifungal drug, but it facilitates mucor growth. How does it possible? If we talk about TB, right? What is MDR, TB, and XDR evolve? We all know that. How they evolve? They evolve because of injudicious use of antibiotics. Same thing also applies here. Voriconazole, if it is taken as a prophylactic or for other aspergillosis or other fungal infection, so during those days, these mucor are exposed to their drugs, and they have changed their virulence or pathogenicity, and they have started to work on that, and that's why they have changed their properties, and that's why they are getting more virulent when people are exposed to voriconazole. And that's why we also can take it as a breakthrough infection, because it should not happen when people are already on prophylactic, something which is antifungal, but they are getting mucormycosis. That's why we can say it as a breakthrough infection. Like we see breakthrough infection in the vaccinated people, right? So how does it possible? Because it increases angio invasion, it increases the uptake of free iron, it increases the adherence of the mucor to the cell surface. So in that way, it increases the chances of having the mucormycosis. And this paper is published in European Society of Clinical Microbiology. Interested person can read the article in detail for better understanding. Now, what are the presenting symptoms and signs of mucormycosis? I already explained that the presentation will depend on the portal of entry, first of all, and the involvement of the organs. Right? For example, portal of entry is nasal cavity, and only nasal cavity is involved, then the presentation will be only the nasal discharge, maybe brownish or blackish, or sometimes blood stain discharge, or maybe local pain, or some nasal blockage presentation, congestion will be there. If it is extended from nasal cavity to sinus region, then some localized pain or local redness or unilateral pain over the affected area, or some swelling over the face, or some paresthesia, because it's along with angio invasion, it's also led to neural invasion. So sometimes paresthesia or numbness also will be there in the local area, or sometimes due to sinus and some jaw involved is there, then that would be some teeth pain or toothache will be there, or from sinus it has spreaded to orbit cavity, then it lead to some presentation of the inhalator headache, or frontal sinus will be involved, then that would be inhalator headache, or periorbital swelling or puffiness around the eye, or if it is eyes involved, then maybe the blood or double vision, or sometimes hemorrhosis or loss of vision may be also presented. Even painless loss of vision can be there. Despite of these things, sometimes patient will present as a pulmonary mucormycosis. In that case, maybe some chest pain or coughing or blood stain, sputum or hemoptysis could be there. And some non-specific symptoms also will be there, like fever or body ache will be there, as we all see in the other infections. One more thing, if it is brain is involved, then mental confusion or altered mental status or disorientation, or maybe sometimes coma also reported. So it all depends on the extension of involvement and the portal of entry. Sometimes it may present as only skin involvement, or sometimes maybe present as a GI involvement, or maybe disseminate. So presentation all depends on the portal of entry and involvement of the organs. Now, what are the signs? Signs, we all know that signs will be found out by the the treating physician. If we see in the nasal cavity, we will see the ulceration or necrosis or some blood stain or blackish discharge, or the discoloration of particularly the middle turbinate, that is the pathognomic feature. Middle turbinate involvement is the most common involvement in the nasal cavity, and blackish discoloration of middle turbinate is a diagnostic feature, right? In oral examination, maybe the hard palate. Hard palate will have the black eschar, or black eschar means it's a punched out blackish ulceration due to that necrosis. In sinusitis, maybe the tenderness would be seen. What is tenderness? When we are releasing the pressed area, we'll have the pain, right? In ocular examination, what we will find in the initial stage, in the initial phase of the disease, we will find only the redness or swelling around the eye. But in the later stage of the disease, we will have the protrusion of the eye or restricted eye movement because of ophthalmoplegia. Ocular muscles will be involved. Ocular muscles will be involved, and there will be paralysis of ocular muscles. That's why it will lead to restricted eye movement. If we do a fundus examination, we will find the papilloedema or disc edema, and if lungs are involved, then we will find the necrosis of the lung tissue. So these are the common signs which we'll see during our investigation. So we'll talk about those things also again in the diagnostic part. Okay. These are the pictures I have taken from Indian Medical Association guideline. These are some real pictures. If you see initial phase of orbital involvement, that is only the discharge and puffiness around the eye and drooping of the eyelid. In later stage, it's more severe form. And this is the eschar, orbital tissue around the eyes, got necrose and blackish in discoloration. This is hard palate involved, and eschar is there, and necrosis is there. This is the photo of nasal endoscopy. You see that is blackish fungal growth in the cavity. So these are the real picture. It could be even worse than this. If you Google it and you will see the mucormycosis, then you will be able to understand how deadly disease it is. Now that's why we need to understand the importance of knowing the signs and symptoms, the different diagnostic modalities, and the risk factors, so we can understand the things in a very scientific way, in correct way, and we can work on that, and we diagnose the patients as early as possible, and we can prevent the mortality and the suffering of the patients. Classification, as far as classification is concerned, there are 5 main subtypes of mucormycosis: rhinocerebellar mucormycosis, pulmonary, GI, cutaneous, and disseminated. One line from each subtype is need to understand is very important. First, rhinocerebral mucormycosis seen in uncontrolled diabetic patients or who are on steroid therapy. Pulmonary mucormycosis seen among who are suffering from hematological malignancy like leukemia or lymphoma. GI mucormycosis seen only those who are severely malnourished, mostly children, right? Then cutaneous mucormycosis seen among who are having the trauma or burns, and disseminated can be any of those four. So are you getting my point? Rhinocerebral mucormycosis is seen among patients who are having uncontrolled diabetic status or either on the high sugar level or either on the steroid therapy. Pulmonary mucormycosis is seen patients who are neutropenic. This is very common, neutropenic, and having the malignancy like leukemia or lymphoma. GI mucormycosis is seen severely malnourished child. Cutaneous mucormycosis is seen among one patients or trauma, any trauma is there, and disseminated can be among these all four subtypes. Okay, so are you getting my point here? Clinical subtypes: rhinocerebral, pulmonary, GI, cutaneous, and disseminated. These are very uncommon. We generally do not talk about these subtypes. Now, what are the alarming symptoms to watch for? Okay, these are the we already discussed: headache or nasal obstruction. These are which are not relieved by the routine pain medicines, or nasal crusting, which are having the brownish or blood stain, or maybe pain or loss of sensation over the face, or discoloration of the skin like SR, which already seen in the photographs, or losing of the teeth, or discoloration or ulcers of the palate, or loss of vision or double vision. These are the alarming symptoms which need to be told to the patients, or that to be known by the treating physician or treating surgeon. That's why we need to take action promptly. Now let's talk about the diagnosis. For diagnosis, we have three things. First is biopsy, culture, and imaging. Imaging either in the CT or MRI. For biopsy, we generally take the CT guided biopsy or endoscopic biopsy. We take a sample, and generally we do a grinding of the biopsy taken material, but we will not do in the fungal biopsy because the hyphae, which are delicate, and we can lose the viability of those hyphae. That's why we should not grind those taken sample. That's why biopsy will be taken from the tissue, and that will be taken for further microscopy and further culture. Microscopy, we do a potassium hydroxide, in which we will find out the hyphae, which are broad, aseptate, and obtuse angle of the branching. For example, it's like this. That would be hyphae, that is active form of mucor, that is we will see in the microscopy with the potassium hydroxide. Now we should understand why we take a potassium hydroxide. We all know that potassium hydroxide will remove those proteinaceous material which disturbs or interfere the diagnosis of fungal cell wall. That's why we use potassium hydroxide. Fungal growth can be seen in the two media, Seborrhoeic-dextrose agar media or Potato-dextrose agar media. And in that, for that culture, we use test tubes rather than the petri dishes, because we all know that fungal growth are not advisable for on the petri dishes. In the growth, we will see 2 or 3 identical or pathognomic presentation, like cotton candy-like growth will be there. It also called as a lead lifters, because the growth will be out of the test tube and the lid will be lifted up. And sometimes in the rhizopus, the salt and pepper appearance will be there. For example, some whitish and some black. Discoloration of the growth will be also there in the culture. So the short question or some MCQ can be asked: what kind of growth peculiarities will be seen in the Seborrhoeic-dextrose agar? Then the answer is cotton candy-like growth or lead lifters or salt pepper appearance. Along with this biopsy and culture, we should also do some baseline studies like CBC to see whether there is a neutropenia or not, ESR to see the information, blood sugar in the form of FBS or PPBS or SpA1c, RFT, because chronic renal failure is also one of the factors for epithelial mucormycosis, or some electrolytes to see ketoacidosis, diabetic ketoacidosis there or not, metabolic acidosis rather. So these things are also can be done. Then after sometimes debridement is done, then those things also taken for histopathology examination, and then we do a 2 staining, periodic acidic SIP staining or Gomori methylamine silver stain. In that staining, we will see the ribbon-like appearance. That is also one of the feature of mucormycosis or mucor fungus. And fluorescent stain, that I have kept that photograph in my title slide. That is fluorescent stain fungal mucor growth and mucor picture. And for that we use CLW stain. That is alkofluor white stain. Okay, that is also about biopsy and culture. Now talk about the imaging. We use MRI and sometimes CT scan for knowing the involvement of other organs and to know the extension or the severity of the mucormycosis. So there are some pathognomic features like black turbinate sign. If you see in the mucormycosis in MRI, that is severe form of nasal involvement. If you see fluid in the sinus, that is also, or some opacification of the sinus, that also a severe form of mucormycosis. If you see edema in the orbital muscles, particularly medial rectus muscle, then also severe form of mucormycosis. So there are three pathognomic signs: black turbinate sign for nasal cavity, fluid in the sinus or opacification of the sinus, and third is edema in the medial rectus muscles of the eye. These are the three very important MCQ from PG entrance point of view. Other things are very uncommon and not specific for mucormycosis, so we can skip those things. This is the summary of all the diagnostic modalities. That is the European Confederation for Mycology. They have framed this diagnostic algorithm. I am not going to emphasize all the parameters, but what I am emphasizing is this serological test. There are two options: galactomannan and 1,3-beta-D-glucan. These are two serological tests are under investigation. They are not specific and sensitive as of now, but they are going to be work for us for a faster diagnosis, because serological diagnosis are very easy to do. But as of now, we are doing only direct microscopy, culture, and imaging. Right? These are which we all discuss in detail. So I'm skipping these other things here. Okay, now let's talk about the management. Management includes two things: medical management and surgical management. Medical management and surgical management. Medical management includes three things: amphotericin B, posaconazole, and isavuconazole. And surgical treatment is definitely removal of the dead tissue. So amphotericin B is the treatment of choice or drug of choice for mucormycosis, right? But mucormycosis, it's a very deadly disease, and it involves different organs or different body parts. So it requires a team of microbiologists, medicine specialist, neurologist, eye specialist, ENT specialist, dentist, general surgeons. So lots of people are involved for the treatment of mucormycosis. But the main step treatment is IV antifungal in the initial phase of the treatment, and later on it can be switch on to the oral antifungal. And surgical treatment definitely it's also along with the medical treatment, it's also one of the mainstay of the treatment, because by removing the infected tissue, we are removing the chances of further spreading of the infection, and by not letting the fungal to grow. Now let's talk about the amphotericin B in detail. There are three types of amphotericin B: amphotericin B liposomal, amphotericin B lipid complex, and amphotericin B deoxyfolate. But the most commonly used and less renal toxic and having the ability of entry or penetration into the orbit or into the brain, that is only with the liposomal amphotericin B. That's why it's a very good drug. But the issue is cost and availability. It's a highly costly drug. It costs around 4,000 or 5,000 per vial, and each patient requires 40, 60, or 80 vials. So you can have idea how much cost could be involved in the amphotericin B. But what is the option when there is no amphotericin B? Then we can go for amphotericin B deoxyfolate or amphotericin B lipid complex. But out of these two, I would say amphotericin B lipid complex is better as compared to the best one is liposomal. Then second one is amphotericin B lipid complex, and least preferable is amphotericin B deoxyfolate. Now, what is the dose of liposomal amphotericin B? The preferable dose is 5 mg per kg, but sometimes it to be escalated or incremented to 8 to 10 mg per kg when there is orbit or eye or brain is involved. How to give the amphotericin B? It should be diluted with distilled water, not with the saline. It's a distilled water. For 60 kg, for example, one average adult is 60 kg. So 5 mg per kg, it will take it to 300 mg for one adult per day. So each vial of amphotericin B is 50 kg. So it requires 50 mg into 6 vial. That will be 30 mg. 300 mg. Sorry. So 500 mg into 6 will be 300 mg. So each 50 mg will require 10 ml of distilled water. So for 300 mg, we will require 60 ml of distilled water. So 60 ml, 6 vial of amphotericin B will be dose of 60 kg weight of adult per day. And those 60 ml reconstituted solution will be given as an infusion of 5% dextrose, 200 ml. Are you getting my point? 60 ml reconstituted solution, distilled water plus amphotericin B. That infusion will be given as a dextrose, 5% dextrose, and that should be given slowly over a period of 2 to 3 hours. And what should be monitored while we are giving liposomal amphotericin B? We should monitor at least 2 parameters: serum creatinine and C-reactive protein, and on every alternate day to see whether renal toxicity is there or not, so we can change our treatment options. Sometimes it's not possible to give amphotericin B. Then in that case, we can give as a salvage therapy, only the life-saving therapy or salvage therapy as a posaconazole or isavuconazole. Posaconazole can be given as on the first day. It will be given as twice a day as a 300 milligram, and second day onwards it will be given as a OD for 2 to 4 weeks at least. Right? So on second day onwards it will be given as a 300 mg OD. On first day it will be given as a BD. Isavuconazole given as a 200 milligram, but TDS for 2 days, and then followed by 200 mg once a day. Okay, 200 mg TDS for 2 days, and then 200 mg OD. Right? So one more thing that I would like to highlight here is sometimes even after amphotericin B, some patients require posaconazole as a subsequent oral therapy. Okay, so after IV therapy, patients are switch on to oral therapy. Okay, that is the medical treatment. Surgical treatment is very, very understandable. Sometimes it just requires only debridement of the affected part. Sometimes it requires some radical treatment like removal of the eye, excision of the eye. And when it is to be done, when there is involvement of ocular muscles, when there are 3 or more muscles are involved, then the only option is eye removal. And so far we have observed that every 4th patient of mucormycosis are losing their eyes. Okay, so there is a 25% eye removal. But debridement should be done as early as possible to prevent further progression of the disease and for radical removal of the organs. Otherwise, it's a very disfigurement for the patients. Removal of vital organs, the handicap after the treatment will be there. So these things should be avoided. What are the constraints which we face in treatment of mucormycosis? First diagnosis, delay in diagnosis. Why it's delay in diagnosis? Because very unspecific clinical features of mucormycosis in the early stage, like pain over the face or redness or some pain in the tooth that are not specific. So there is a delay in diagnosis. Some user-friendly or rapid tests are not there. Serological tests are not good. So only the diagnosis can be done with the biopsy or some imaging. That's why delay is quite possible. Second thing is drug. Amphotericin B drug is not widely available. The cost is high. That's why the delay in availing the amphotericin B, and sometimes the cost also leads to stopping the treatment in between way, and that's why leads to the bad outcome. Third thing is surgical debridement. Sometimes it's not possible to do surgical debridement then when there is a deep organ mucormycosis. Deep organ mucormycosis means when there is a brain involved or lungs are involved. In that case, we can not do surgical debridement as we can easily in the nasal cavity or eye involved. Sometimes we try in cerebral mucormycosis, but still it's difficult. One more thing is that we have observed that many patients with mucormycosis left treatment against medical advice just because of hospitalization cost and drug toxicity. Because lots of patients are not on the liposomal amphotericin B, but they are on amphotericin B deoxycholate, which is renal toxic. But why they are on that? Because amphotericin B is costlier and not easily available. And one more constraint which we observe that co-infection. Sometimes aspergillus is there also, which disturbs our diagnostic and treatment modalities. Now prevention, do's and don'ts. Let's do it fast. First, we should control hyperglycemia as it is very problematic for us for mucormycosis. Monitor blood sugar during COVID-19 and even after discharge on a regular basis and control the sugar. Steroid judiciously, correct timing, correct dose, and correct duration. What is correct timing? You should not start steroid in early phase of COVID-19. It should start only on the fifth day of the infections. It should be given at the minimum possible dose for the minimum possible duration. Use only sterile water during oxygen therapy for the humidifiers to avoid the spores. Use antibiotic, antifungal judiciously. We already discussed why antibiotic and antifungals are problematic for mucormycosis. We should avoid these things to do, which are enlisted on the right. We should not miss warning signs. We already discussed what are the alarming signs and symptoms. We should not consider all the blocked nose as a protein vector infection. Every blockage of nose among the patients who are immunosuppression or known patients on immunomodulators, they should be screened for mucormycosis. We should not hesitate to see aggressive investigation like biopsy or scanning or some newer tests like MALDI-TOF for detecting fungal etiology. And we should not lose crucial time for initial treatment of mucormycosis. We should not wait for all the investigation to come the reports. We should start empirical therapy when our suspicion is high. We should not wait for culture to grow or scanning is done, right? We should start treatment as early as possible. What other we can do? We can maintain the immunity. We can avoid self-medications. We should be vigilant over the symptoms. We should understand that mucormycosis is not contagious. We should do a good self-care. Immunocompromised or post-COVID era, we should avoid some outdoor works like doing work in the art side or in the customer side. We should avoid and we should take precautions while doing all those works by wearing the mask, and some basic hygiene also should be practiced to avoid the exposure to the fungal spores. What preventive measures to be taken by the healthcare providers? They should do some disinfecting procedures by using some ICU gadgets, some endoscopic instruments, some oxygen delivery devices. They should do a frequent cleaning of the premises. They should keep patients isolated during COVID. They should use some disposables for patient care. They should practice infection prevention control policies. They should use antifungal antibiotics very judiciously, immunomodulator, immunosuppressive drugs as per protocol only, right? They should do in their own way. Second thing is they should control sugar level around 110 to 180. This is the guideline. They should, for non-diabetic patient, this should be the range. It should not go beyond the 200, right? This is the guideline. Then some precautions regarding ophthalmic evaluation or ENT evaluation to be done periodically, at least on the day of discharge, and then after between the weekly periodic investigation to be done, and follow patients also to be do a weekly scanning for seeing the relapse of the disease or any progression of the disease. We have to do a weekly scan. So these are the things to be taken care of by the healthcare provider. What advice to be given to the patients at the time of discharge as a COVID patient? They should be told that they should monitor their blood glucose level. They should watch their warning signs of the mucormycosis, like any nasal blockage, any pain around the eye, any unilateral headache, any unusual tooth pain, or any discharge. These are things to be reported as early as possible. We are about to finish the presentation, so let me finish 3 or 4 slides. Notification, this is very important. Government of India already issued the notification or gadgets that black fungus or mucormycosis is now notifiable disease under the Epidemic Act 1897. Okay, that is very important. It is also one of the MCQ that can be asked. And why it is that? Because it leads to prolonged morbidity and mortality. That's why we need to understand, and we should have idea what is the current scenario, and according to that we can plan our further allocation of the resources. And so far, Rajasthan, Telangana, Odisha, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Chandigarh, and Gujarat already declared black fungus as an epidemic in their states, and they have started already to notify the disease in the National Health Portal as a notifiable disease. Okay, this is important slide and as a contradictory slide. What we have discussed so far in 32 slides is not fitting in these slides, but this is the real data of mucormycosis of Gujarat state. If you see, out of all the mucormycosis patients, 59% patients were diabetic. So 41 despite of having mucormycosis, were not diabetic. Out of total mucormycosis, 50% were not on steroid. So every second patient of mucormycosis was not on steroid. Oxygen therapy was only 1/3 of the patients of mucormycosis. Only 1/3 patients were on oxygen therapy. So humidifier and oxygen from the industrial supply are not fitting in the real data. Then immunocompromised other than the diabetic status were only among the 22% people, and comorbidities were among 52.2% other than the diabetic. So as of now, definitely 60% are diabetic. So definitely the most common predisposing situation is diabetic status. CFR cannot be estimated as of now because 81.6% of patients are still admitted. So outcome is not known yet. So we cannot have the real CFR. But as of now, 4% have succumbed to the mucormycosis. But this number will go up in the near future. What is the age group is most commonly involved? 46.3% of the patients are from the age group of 45 to 60. So it's a very productive age group involved in the mucormycosis. That's why it's an area of concern for us. 67.1% are male mucormycosis. So it's a very fitting to the distribution of the COVID-19 cases also. So COVID-19 also almost same presentation. More than 65% of the COVID-19 cases are male. So that's also very fitting that also. So I hope you are getting my point through this slide that lots of things are to be evaluated, to be understood, because lots of things which are theoretically are not seen in the reality. Some of my friends have done one more study in their tertiary hospital, and they have found that the mean age of presentation was 54 years. So almost that is also along with the state data. 35.9% were female patients. That is also along with the state data. But the 70% of the patients were diabetic. That is 10% more than the state data. So that is one theory can be evaluated here. A diabetic is definitely one of the reasons. But the striking feature is out of those 70% diabetic mucormycosis patient, 43% of them diagnosed in just last 1 year. So maybe they are COVID-19 induced hyperglycemic patients, not diabetic. So that's also need to be evaluated. And in this study, they have found every second patient was on oxygen therapy. So still oxygen therapy is also not a big risk factor as of now. So there are multiple things need to be understand. It's a multifactorial opportunistic infection. And out of this all discussion, what I conclude from my opinion is COVID-19 infection itself making prone the patient to develop the mucormycosis rather than all these predisposing factors itself independent risk factor or independent positive factor. Okay. So on base of this discussion, I have find out some area of research. This is my last slide. So I suggest all of you that you can plan any research work on these topics, or you can modify according to your own understanding. But we need to understand these things in as it is possible to further change our treatment modality, our preventive measures, and our investigative modalities. So first is why people without diabetes also getting mucormycosis after COVID-19 infection. Why people without oxygen therapy also getting COVID-19 infections? What is the role of COVID vaccine in terms of prevention of mucormycosis after COVID-19 infection? If vaccine is making us mild in COVID-19 infection, then definitely mucormycosis will be less, but that needs to be established. Which treatment modality is giving the best result? Which Amphotericin B or oral drugs are also is equally effective as Amphotericin B IV? That also need to be evaluated. Is there any role of antifungal prophylactic in terms of prevention of mucormycosis? Whether any preventive measures that to be specifically identified therapy, whether it to be taken for 4 to 6 weeks or more than that or for months, that also need to be established. And what are the reasons for having mucormycosis as a breakthrough infection when person is already on a antifungal prophylactic regime? And this is last slide. Again, the best way of prevention of mucormycosis is the prevention of COVID-19. And the best way of prevention of COVID-19 is COVID appropriate behavior. And these are the 15 different ways to prevent COVID-19 and stopping the transmission, like greeting from the distance, keeping 2 meter distance between 2 individuals, wearing mask, not going in the crowded area, frequently touch surface should be disinfected, hand washing, some helpline should be used, not using too much news, All those things are to be discussed, and all of you must be knowing these things. So this is done from my side. Any questions or anything that to be taken? The forum is open. Over
Sir,
to Venkatesh.
Excellent. So, thanks a lot for the wonderful and extensive presentation, sir. I'm pretty sure that the audience now have a clear idea about the ins and outs of the mucormycosis. So we are coming to the end of the session, and a few have already started asking questions in the chat box, which I will read out, sir. If any other questions are there, please start typing. So the first question is that can steam inhalation be a predisposing factor?
For example, already we have seen that in the real data, there oxygen therapy. Even though it's a oxygen therapy, if it's not, but real data says that only 40% or even maximum 50% patients were on the oxygen therapy. So still, huge number of patients are not even on the oxygen therapy, though they develop the mucormycosis. So I think steam therapy is still not can be taken as a predisposing factor as of now, as a mucormycosis, as per my opinion.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
You are using
Sir?
Pure means purified water.
So can we move on to the next question, sir?
Okay, one next question.
Next question. Why haven't Maharashtra declared mucormycosis an epidemic despite these many number of cases? Asked by an attendee.
Yeah. As per my opinion, they should declare it as early as possible, because there are two advantages. First, you will have the notification, and that will be the line listing of the cases, so that you are going to understand what the age group is involved, what was the predisposing factors, and what is the requirement of the drugs, amphotericin B, all that. And for future planning also it will help. So I think without wasting time, Maharashtra government should declare as a COVID-19, it's a mucormycosis as a notifiable disease. But what's the reason why they are not taking it as a seriously? I'm not getting it. But it should be declared as possible, as per my opinion.
Okay, sir. So the next question: what is the difference between white fungus and yellow fungus?
Actually, some WhatsApp also started to circulate when the first time black fungus came into talk. That would be the rainbow of the fungus, but that is not the reality. Only two major type of fungals which we talk, like white fungus and black fungus. Yellow fungus, actually, as such, there is no yellow fungus. It is just super added bacterial infection that first makes yellow discoloration. Otherwise, candidiasis, it's a white fungus, and black fungus is formally called as a mucormycosis. White fungus, yellow fungus is nothing but fungal infection added with bacterial infection.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. And last question, sir. Can you please shed some light on pediatric mucormycosis? Apart from what you have discussed, is there something which we should know about mucormycosis in pediatrics age group?
Okay, as of now, we all know that pediatric age group is not involved in COVID-19 as such. Other age group involved, though they are getting infected, but they are not getting the disease itself, right? So that's why the number of patients of mucormycosis among the pediatric age group is only 0.5% as of now. But what we are anticipating in the third wave, the age group that would be more involved in the third wave will be the pediatric age group. That is the theoretical part. So we are all also anticipating the same for the mucormycosis also. That's why we need to understand what would be the presentation in the among the children as far as mucormycosis is concerned. But what I have referred, I haven't seen any specific features or any specific things about pediatric age group. But definitely the pediatric association would definitely work on that, and they might release any guideline regarding pediatric age group in the near future. But as of now, as such, no any specific difference in terms of presentation or in terms of diagnostic modalities or in terms of treatment options, any difference in the, because the dose which is given as a amphotericin B is the as per mg per kg. So there is no any things which need to be specifically talk about pediatric age group as of now. But definitely there should be some understanding when the more cases will be reported from these age group. Then we would have some better idea whether there is any change in the presentation or in the progression or in the outcome. But as of now, very few cases are there. So the understanding regarding mucormycosis among the post-COVID pediatric age group is less.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, so there are a few more questions which you might directly write to me or sir. Sir will answer them in the future. Because of time constraint, we are closing here now. And few have asked for recording of the session that will be available after a week in IMA Junior Doctors Network Facebook page and Instagram page. So, so I would like to come to the end of the session, sir. To thank our speaker and all our participants, I request my mentor and national convener of IMA JDN, Dr. Shiv Joshi, sir, to deliver the vote of thanks.